Hey guys, tonight we begin with the back-breaking, sun-scorched and body-destroying world of building the Egyptian pyramids. You've seen the documentaries, impressive engineering, ancient ambition. You don't know what it cost. So, before we go any further, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from and what time it is for you. It is always fascinating to see who is joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine this. It is 110 degrees. You are one of 25 men hauling a 2-ton limestone block across sand. The rope cuts into your shoulder, opening wounds that never heal, because tomorrow you'll do this again. Your back is screaming. Your feet are blistering on stone heated to the temperature of a cooking surface. Behind you, an overseer with a whip. Crack. Someone wasn't pulling hard enough. Ahead of you, 19 more years of this. If you survive, you are not a slave, despite what Hollywood told you. You are a conscripted farmer, pulled from your field during flood season, when you can't farm anyway. Told you are performing sacred duty for Pharaoh Khufu, promised food and beer, and expected to not die. One of roughly 100,000 workers who will spend the next 20 years moving 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing between 2.5 and 15 tons, into a structure that will rise 481 feet into the Egyptian sky. This is 2560 BC. This is the Great Pyramid of Giza. This is your life now. Let's start with what kills you fastest. The heat. Egypt in summer isn't just hot, it is weaponized sunshine. By mid-morning, 110 degrees Fahrenheit. The sun doesn't shine, it attacks. The stones are too hot to touch with bare skin. You pour water on blocks before moving them, or you get instant blisters. The kind that turn to infection, the kind that kill you slowly, when Bronze Age medicine can't help. You are wearing a linen kilt and nothing else, not fashion. Survival. More clothing in this heat would kill you faster than the work itself. Your skin is burned dark brown, not from beach days, but from spending every single day under direct sun with no shade. No relief, except the brief moments when the pyramid's shadow passes over your section, if you are lucky enough to be working on that side. Most days, you are not. The heat does things to your body you don't understand, but definitely feel. By noon, you are beyond sweating. Your body's out of water. This is the danger zone. The state that kills people. But you can't stop, because stopping means the whip, so you keep pulling. Vision blurring, thoughts fuzzy. Core temperature rising to levels that would terrify a modern doctor. But this is normal for pyramid construction. The second thing that hits you is the noise. 100,000 men working simultaneously. The scraping of stone on stone, constant and grating. The rhythmic chanting of work gangs coordinating their pulls. The crack of wooden levers being wedged under blocks. The crash when a block settles into place. Or worse, when it falls and crushes whoever was too slow to move. Overseers shouting. Whips cutting through air and sometimes through skin. The sound is loud enough that you've developed permanent ringing in your ears, a high-pitched tone that never stops, not even when you collapse at night in your mud, brick barracks. And underneath it all, the human sounds. Men grunting with effort. Men screaming when accidents happen. Men crying out for water that isn't coming. Men praying to gods who seem very distant. When you are hauling a block up a ramp at 100 feet elevation, with no railings and a drop that will definitely kill you. Men dying. Sometimes quietly, sometimes not. Your day starts before dawn, not for comfort, because working in peak heat kills people faster, and even overseers know corpses don't haul stones. You wake in a crowded barracks. 40 men on reed mats, sleeping on dirt still radiating yesterday's heat. The wake-up call is a foreman shouting, sometimes kicking. You stumble outside into pre-dawn darkness that is already warm. Already promising another day where heat will make you wish for death. Water distribution first. You line up with hundreds of others, receive your morning ration. Drink it immediately because it is the only water you are guaranteed for the next several hours. The water tastes metallic, has particles floating in it that you don't examine too closely. But you drink it anyway because dehydration kills faster than whatever diseases the water carries. Then you join your work gang. 25 men. One block, you know most of them. 3 years into 20. Some are the same men you started with. Most aren't. They died, got injured, collapsed, and never got up. Fresh bodies arrive from villages across Egypt to replace the broken ones. The system maintains workforce levels. regardless of casualty rate. The block is 2.5 tons, 5,000 pounds, a stone cube 3 feet on each side. It sits on a wooden sledge. Ropes at the front. Your gang lines up, spacing out. You are in the middle, the worst position. Full force. No mechanical advantage. You don't complain. Complaining earns you the whip. The overseer signals, your gang leans in. The chant begins. 25 men pulling simultaneously. Feet digging into sand. Legs burning. Backs straining. Shoulders screaming as rope cuts flesh. The block doesn't move. Pull harder. Chant louder. The block shifts. Inches, then feet. Sliding slowly, grudgingly, across wetted sand. Pull, step, pull, step, pull, step. This is your job. This rhythm. This motion. Moving at maybe 1 mile per h when everything goes well, which it rarely does. The route from quarry to pyramid base is half a mile. On a good day, your gang makes 3 trips. That is 1.5 miles of hauling, 6 hours of continuous pulling, and at the end your shoulders are raw, where the rope wore through skin. Your back is locked in spasm, your legs shake so badly you can barely walk. And that is a good day. Bad days, the sledge gets stuck, sand not wetted properly. The rope breaks under load, men tumbling, the block shifts. Hours wasted repositioning, an overseer decides you are too slow. Crack, the whip, motivation through pain. Someone collapses, heat exhaustion, dragged aside while you keep pulling. Stopping means the block settles deeper, harder to move. Can't stop. The whip is constant, not metaphorical, literal. Overseers carry them, use them, not constantly. Injured workers are useless, but enough that everyone knows. The crack means move faster, or you are next. The whip doesn't always break skin, doesn't need to. Welts hurt for days. Make the rope across your shoulders. Worse. Remind you, you are not here by choice. Hour into the morning, heat's already serious. 95 degrees, climbing to 110. Sweat pours off you, soaking your kilt. Dripping into sand. You are losing water faster than you can replace it. Dehydrating in real time. 5-minute water break. You don't sit. Sitting stiffens muscles. You stand swaying. Drink too fast. Want more. More isn't coming. 5 minutes ends. Back to ropes. Back to pulling. The rhythm resumes. Midday. Heat like physical weight, forcing you into the ground. 110 degrees. Maybe higher on sun. Heated stones. You are beyond sweating. Danger zone. Your body can't cool itself. Core temperature rising. Vision blurring. Thoughts fuzzy. This state kills people. But you can't stop. Overseer hasn't called a break. Stopping means punishment. 3 hours in. Someone ahead collapses. Just stops pulling. Legs give out. Falls forward. Face in sand. Formation breaks. Pull becomes uncoordinated. Block stops. Overseer screaming. Keep pulling. Drag him aside. Get a replacement. Reserve workers follow each gang for exactly this reason. The collapsed man is pulled to the side. Conscious, unconscious, can't tell, possibly dying, not your problem. Block must reach its destination. Replacement steps in, young guy, 18 maybe. Still has fat on him, fresh from his village, not worked down to bone and sinew. Yet, give him 2 months, he'll look like you. He takes the rope, gang resumes pulling. The collapsed worker, left lying in whatever shade exists. None, hopefully recovers. Probably dies. System doesn't care about individuals. Only aggregate labour. The haul continues. Pull, step, The rhythm is everything. Only thought in your head. Only focus you can maintain. Stop thinking about pain, about heat, about anything except the next step. Next pull, stay in formation. Don't collapse. Your consciousness narrows. World reduced to rope, sand. The back of the man in front of you. Finally, hours later, the block reaches its destination at the pyramid's base. The overseer signals release. You let go of the rope, your hands cramping, fingers not wanting to uncurl from the position they've held for 3 hours. Your shoulders are bleeding where the rope cut through calluses. Your back is locked up, can't fully straighten. Your legs are shaking, barely holding you up. You're exhausted, and it is only mid-morning, and you have 2 more hauls to do today. But first, the midday rest. 30 minutes to eat and drink and not pull ropes. You sit heavily on sand that is hot enough to burn, but you are too tired to care. Food is distributed. Bread and onions. The same meal you've eaten for 1,000 days. The bread is gritty, full of stone particles from the grain, grinding down your teeth as you chew. The onions make you want to vomit from sheer repetition, but you eat them anyway, because calories are survival. And survival is all you have left. The water ration at midday is larger, recognition that men are dying from heat and corpses don't haul stones. You drink slowly this time, letting your body absorb it, feeling it spread through your tissues. It is not enough to fully rehydrate, but it is enough to keep you functional for the afternoon shift. Around you, hundreds of other workers doing the same, sitting in whatever shade they can find, which is minimal, because shade on a flat plateau, under Egyptian sun, at noon, is rare. Some men aren't moving. You see workers being carried away, limp and unresponsive, dead from heat stroke or close to it. This happens daily. The weak, the unlucky, the ones whose bodies just can't handle one more day. They collapse and don't get up. New workers arrive from conscription to replace them. The pyramid doesn't care about individual survival. It only cares about aggregate labour, about whether enough men are working to maintain the construction schedule. 30 minutes ends. The overseer stands, shouts for work gangs to resume. Your body doesn't want to stand, protests violently. But you force yourself up because staying down means the whip. Back to the quarry. Back to another block. Back to the ropes and the pulling and the slow destruction of your body in service to Pharaoh's monument. The afternoon shift is worse than the morning. Everyone is already exhausted, depleted, operating on willpower and fear rather than actual physical capacity. The heat is at its peak, 110 degrees sustained. The sun directly overhead offering no escape, no shade, no relief. The blocks move slower because the men pulling them are slower. Each pull requiring more effort, each step harder than the last. And yet the quota must be met. 3 blocks, per G, Ang, per Dalton Y. The overseers push harder in the afternoon, their whips cracking more frequently, hitting men who slow down, hitting men who stumble, creating pain to motivate speed. It is counterproductive, injuries making tomorrow harder. But overseers don't care about tomorrow. They care about today's numbers. Today's quota. Today's report to the architects who manage the project. But hauling on flat ground is just the beginning. Wait until you see the ramps. Once blocks reach the pyramid base, they have to go up. The Great Pyramid at its completion will be 481 feet tall, which means blocks need to be raised to heights where falling means certain death. The engineering solution is ramps, massive earthwork and rubble constructions that spiral around the pyramid or approach from one side, depending on which theory you believe and which phase of construction you are in. The ramps are themselves massive construction projects, requiring millions of cubic feet of material, their own construction workforce, constant maintenance as they're used and eroded. They're built at an incline shallow enough that blocks can be dragged up them, which means for every foot of height you need about 10 feet of ramp length. To reach the top of the pyramid requires ramps over a mile long. You'll spend years building ramps, using ramps, then dismantling ramps, moving the material, building new ramps at higher levels. It is construction inception, projects within projects, work generating more work. Dragging a block up a ramp is exponentially harder than dragging it on level ground. Gravity, that friendly force that keeps you from floating off into space, becomes your enemy. Every foot of elevation gained is a fight against weight trying to slide back down. Your gang of 25 isn't enough anymore. Now it is 40 men on the ropes pulling at an angle. Feet slipping on the ramp's surface, the block inching upward at a pace that makes level ground hauling look fast by comparison. And you are going up, height increases, and with it the danger. Fall from ground level and you might break something. Fall from 50 feet up and you are dead. Fall from 100 feet up and they won't find all of you. The ramps don't have railings because this is 2560 BC and workplace safety is several thousand years away from being invented. You work inches from the edge, and if you slip, if you lose your balance, if the rope pulls you off the edge, you fall. It happens. Weekly the priests perform rituals to honor the fallen workers, which is nice, but doesn't help the person who fell or their family who just lost their primary income source. At the top of the ramp, when your block finally reaches its designated position, a new team takes over. Skilled masons who will fit the block into its precise location in the pyramid structure. This is where the real precision happens. The Great Pyramid's blocks are fitted so exactly that you can't slide a knife blade between them in many places. This precision requires skill, experience, and time. The masons used copper tools to trim each block, adjusting angles, creating the joint surfaces, fitting each stone to its neighbours so perfectly that the whole structure is locked together, not by mortar but by weight and precision. You are not part of that skilled team. You are hauling labour, which means while the masons work, you are already heading back down the ramp to get another block. The work doesn't stop. The work never stops. Khufu wants his pyramid completed before he dies, which means the pace is relentless, driven by a deadline no one can negotiate with, because it is based on one man's mortality. The food is famously bad. Ancient records, found in the workers' cemetery and settlement remains, tell us what pyramid builders ate: bread, onions, and beer, every single day. Bread made from wheat or barley, coarse and gritty, because Bronze Age milling techniques meant the flour was full of stone particles that ground down your teeth. Onions, raw or cooked, the main vegetable, providing flavour and some nutrition, but mostly just making every meal taste like onions. And beer, weak beer, more like liquid bread than what we'd recognise as beer today. Safe to drink unlike the water, providing calories and carbohydrates, but not enough to balance the physical demands. Occasionally, very occasionally, there was meat. Cattle or goats, slaughtered for rations, distributed to work gangs, providing protein that was desperately needed, but never sufficient. The meat portions were small, a few ounces per person, barely a taste of something other than bread and onions. Special occasions, religious festivals, or when a pharaoh wanted to boost morale, might bring extra rations. But day to day, meal after meal, year after year, you ate bread, onions, and beer. Your body craved variety, craved nutrients you weren't getting, craved anything that didn't taste like the same three things you'd been eating for months. The monotony of diet contributed to health problems that were rampant among pyramid workers. Scurvy from lack of vitamin C, though the onions helped slightly. Anemia from insufficient iron and protein. Dental diseases from the gritty bread grinding down teeth and causing infections. Malnutrition, related conditions that weakened immune systems and made every minor illness potentially fatal. You were burning thousands of calories daily hauling stone, but you weren't consuming enough nutrition to fully recover. Your body was slowly cannibalizing itself, burning muscle for energy, weakening bones, creating a deficit that meant you aged faster, got sick easier, and died younger than if you'd stayed in your village farming. The living conditions matched the food quality, which is to say terrible. Workers lived in purpose, built settlements near the construction site, planned communities that housed the massive workforce in the most efficient way possible, which meant cramped, crowded, and barely functional. Your barracks was a mud brick structure housing 40 to 50 men in a single room. No privacy, no personal space. Sleeping mat to mat on a dirt floor, sharing air that smelled of sweat, dirt, and too many humans in too small a space. The heat didn't stop at sunset. The mud, brick walls absorbed heat all day and radiated it all night, turning the barracks into ovens. You'd lie on your reed mat, body aching from the day's work, unable to sleep because of the heat and the pain, and the man next to you, snoring. And the man on the other side having nightmares about falling off the ramp. Sleep was fitful, interrupted, insufficient. You never felt rested. You just felt degrees of exhausted. Sanitation was basic at best. Latrines were communal pits at the edge of the settlement, offering no privacy and breeding flies that spread disease throughout the workers' camp. Washing facilities were limited, water too precious to waste on cleaning bodies when it was needed for construction and drinking. You lived in a state of perpetual filth, dust and sweat, and sand coating your skin, your hair matted with dirt. Your smell strong enough that you stopped noticing it, because everyone smelled the same. Disease spread rapidly in these conditions. Dysentery from contaminated food or water, killing through dehydration. Respiratory infections from the crowded living conditions, and the dust constantly in the air. Parasitic infestations from poor sanitation. Eye infections from the sun and sand and lack of hygiene. Workers sickened and died regularly. Their bodies removed from the barracks at night, carried to the workers' cemetery where thousands of pyramid builders were buried, their contribution to Pharaoh's monument ending in an unmarked grave. Medical care existed, but was primitive. Physicians treated workers using herbal remedies, setting broken bones, cleaning wounds, performing what passed for surgery with copper instruments. Some physicians were skilled, had real knowledge of anatomy and treatment. Others were less competent. Either way, there were no antibiotics, no anesthesia beyond alcohol or opium, if you were lucky, no understanding of germ theory or infection prevention. A broken leg might heal or might become infected and kill you. A wound might close, or might fester. You recovered through luck and constitution more than medical intervention. The injuries were constant and varied. Rope burns where the hauling ropes cut through skin on shoulders and hands, creating raw wounds that never fully healed because you were using the same damaged skin again the next day. Back injuries from the constant strain, muscles torn, vertebrae compressed, spines gradually collapsing under the repetitive stress of hauling weight that humans weren't designed to move. Crushed limbs from blocks that shifted or fell, bones shattered beyond repair, amputations performed with copper, sores, survival uncertain. Your spine, in particular, was taking damage that would plague you for whatever remained of your life. The human spine isn't designed for sustained heavy lifting, certainly not for dragging multi-ton stones for hours daily, year after year. The vertebrae compressed, the discs between them crushed and bulging, nerve damage causing pain that radiated down your legs, making every step agony. By age 30, if you survived that long, you walked bent forward, unable to fully straighten, your body permanently deformed by the work. By 40, you were useless for heavy labor, your back destroyed, your usefulness to the pyramid project ended. The archaeological evidence tells the story. Your bones couldn't speak aloud. Excavations of the workers' cemetery have revealed skeletons, showing severe degenerative arthritis in the spine and joints, healed fractures that set improperly, signs of chronic malnutrition, dental diseases, and trauma injuries. One skeleton showed evidence of a surgical amputation, the bone cut cleanly, the man surviving the operation, but living with one leg for whatever years remained. Another showed multiple healed fractures, a worker who'd been injured repeatedly, but kept working, kept hauling stone until something finally killed him. The mortality rate wasn't recorded precisely, but modern estimates based on the cemetery evidence and the construction timeline suggest that several thousand workers died during the 20-year construction period. That is not counting injuries that ended working careers, but didn't immediately kill. Out of a workforce that fluctuated between 20,000 and 100,000 depending on season, a death rate of a few percent annually meant that participating in pyramid construction was measurably dangerous. More dangerous than staying home farming. But not so dangerous that you'd certainly die. Just dangerous enough that you might, and you knew people who had. The accidents were the spectacular deaths, the ones that happened suddenly and left an impression. A rope breaking under strain, the block sliding backward down the ramp, crushing anyone in its path. A worker losing balance on the ramp's edge, falling from height, the body hitting the ground with a sound that made everyone stop working for a moment. A block being positioned at the top, a lever slipping, the stone falling on the mason positioning it. Death instant and total. These accidents happened regularly enough that they weren't shocking, just unfortunate. A reminder that the work was dangerous, and you could be next. The slower deaths were more common, but less dramatic. Heat stroke during summer months, a worker collapsing and never regaining consciousness. Dead from core body temperature rising to levels incompatible with life. Dehydration when water rations were insufficient, or a worker didn't drink enough because they were too focused on work. Infections from minor wounds that became major problems. Fever and delirium and death over days or weeks. Diseases spreading through the crowded barracks, taking the weak and the unlucky. These deaths were expected, factored into the planning, replacements brought in from the next village's conscription. Let's talk about the social structure, because not all pyramid workers were equal. There was a hierarchy, a chain of command that determined who did the hardest work and who had slightly less hard work. At the bottom, you had the hauling gangs, the lowest status workers, conscripted farmers doing the brutally physical work of moving stone. This was you. This was most workers. The expendable muscle that made the pyramid physically possible. Above the hauling gangs were the skilled workers, masons who cut and fitted the blocks with precision, carpenters who built the sledges and maintained the wooden tools, coppersmiths who sharpened the tools constantly, because copper dulls quickly, and Bronze Age metallurgy hadn't yet perfected bronze alloys. Overseers who managed the work gangs, keeping everyone coordinated and productive. Scribes who recorded the work, tracking blocks moved, tallying rations distributed, documenting the project for posterity and Pharaoh's archives. The skilled workers had it marginally better. Better food rations, more meat, better housing in smaller barracks with more space per person. They weren't hauling stone every day, weren't destroying their spines, had skills that gave them value beyond raw strength. But they were still trapped in the same system, still conscripted for the project, still subject to the overseer's whips if they slacked, still breathing the same dust, and eating too much bread, and onions and working longer hours than humans should work. At the top of the hierarchy were the architects and engineers, men of status who designed the pyramid, calculated the angles, planned the ramps, solved the mathematical and logistical problems of stacking millions of tons of stone into a precise geometric shape. They didn't haul stone, they didn't get whipped. They had comfortable housing, good food, respect from Pharaoh. They were the minds behind the monument. You were the muscle. The priests were present too, performing rituals, blessing the work, reminding everyone that this was sacred duty, that building Pharaoh's tomb was service to the gods, that your suffering had meaning beyond the physical structure you were creating. The religious aspect was important, possibly the only thing that made the work bearable for many workers. If you believed you were building a stairway to heaven for a living god, if you believed your labor had cosmic significance, then maybe the pain was worth it. Maybe. The work gangs had names, recorded in graffiti, on the pyramid stones themselves. Names like Friends of Khufu and Drunkards of Menkor. Work teams creating identities, building camaraderie, finding ways to maintain morale in brutal conditions. The graffiti, painted in red ochre or carved into stone, was the workers' only legacy, their way of saying we were here, we did this, remember us. Most workers would never be remembered individually, but their gang name survived, carved into the stones they moved, proof that they existed and worked and suffered for Pharaoh's monument. The seasons mattered enormously. Pyramid construction peaked during the flood season, roughly July to November, when the Nile inundated the farmland and agricultural work was impossible. During these months, the workforce swelled to its maximum. Farmers from across Egypt conscripted for their labor obligation to Pharaoh. The flood season was actually slightly easier for pyramid work, because the cooler weather meant heat was less of a killing factor, and the Nile at flood stage meant transporting stones by barge was possible for part of the journey. But summer, the months from March to June, were hellish. The heat peaked, temperatures regularly exceeding 110 degrees Fahrenheit, the sun relentless, the work becoming a battle against hypothermia as much as against gravity and weight. The workforce shrank during these months, because working in peak heat killed people faster, and even Pharaoh's project planners recognized that dead workers moved no stones. But work continued, slower but constant, the pyramid growing even during the killer heat, because stopping construction for months at a time would have extended the project timeline unacceptably. Winter, such as it was in Egypt, was almost pleasant. Temperatures dropping to the 60s Myth. During the day, the nights actually cool enough that you might need a blanket. The work was still brutal, still backbreaking, still dangerous, but without the heat trying to kill you simultaneously, it was survivable. Winter months saw maximum productivity, work gangs moving more blocks, ramps advancing faster. The pyramid growing most rapidly during the few months when weather wasn't actively hostile. The dust was omnipresent, inescapable, slowly killing everyone. Limestone dust from cutting blocks, fine particles that hung in the air, coated everything. Got into lungs with every breath. Over months and years, the dust accumulated in lung tissue, causing what we now recognize as silicosis, a progressive lung disease that makes breathing increasingly difficult, that has no cure, that kills slowly through suffocation as lung capacity decreases. Every worker on the pyramid was breathing stone dust. Every day, every breath, accumulating damage that wouldn't manifest fully for years but was happening regardless. The coughing was constant background noise in the workers' settlement. Men coughing up dust, coughing up blood when the lung damage progressed far enough, coughing until they couldn't breathe, dying slowly over months as their lungs filled with scar tissue and stone particles. The dust didn't discriminate. Haulers breathed it, masons breathed it, overseers breathed it. Everyone working on the pyramid was slowly suffocating on stone dust, their lungs turning to stone themselves. A poetic but horrible irony. Your hands were destroyed by the work, calluses built up from rope handling, thick pads of dead skin that protected underlying tissue, but also reduced your sense of touch, made fine motor control difficult. Cuts and scrapes from sharp stone edges, from rope fibers, from wooden splinters from the sledges and levers. Broken fingers from block shifting, from accidents, from getting your hand caught between stone and stone. Your hands at the end of a year of pyramid work looked like they belonged to someone twice your age, gnarled and scarred and deformed, barely recognizable as the hands you'd had when you arrived. Your feet weren't much better. You worked barefoot, or in simple sandals, that provided minimal protection, walking on stone and sand and gravel, all day, every day. The soles of your feet were so callous they were almost like leather, thick enough that you could walk on hot stone without burning. But that thickness came at the cost of chronic pain, cracks that developed in the calluses, infections that entered through those cracks, broken toes from dropped blocks, from stepping wrong, from the 1,000 small accidents that accumulate over months of dangerous work. The psychological toll was significant but unspoken. No one talked about the depression, the hopelessness, the grinding realization that you'd spend years of your life hauling stone for someone else's tomb, that your best years would be consumed by back-breaking labor, that you might die here and be buried in the workers' cemetery without ever returning home. The work was monotonous, despite being exhausting. The same tasks repeated day after day. No variety, no change. Just pull, step, pull, step, pull. Step until your shift ended, and you collapsed and woke up to do it again. Some workers broke mentally before they broke physically. Men who stopped working, stopped caring, sat down and refused to continue despite the whips, despite the threats. These men were dragged away, sometimes beaten, sometimes just removed from the project, sent home if they had homes to return to, left to die if they didn't. The Pyramid Project had no room for workers who couldn't work, no sympathy for mental collapse, no understanding that humans have psychological limits, as real as physical ones. The religion helped some people cope. Belief that this work had meaning beyond the physical, that you were serving the gods, that your labor would be rewarded in the afterlife. If not in this life. The priests held ceremonies, blessed the work gangs, performed rituals at various stages of construction. For true believers, this made the suffering bearable, gave purpose to the pain. For skeptics, it was just more propaganda to keep you compliant. The engineers solved problems you didn't understand and didn't need to understand. Your job was to move stone, not to calculate angles or plan logistics. But their solutions were what made the impossible possible. The ramps designed at precisely the right angle to allow hauling while minimizing length. The water-lubricated sand tracks that reduced friction. The copper tools shaped specifically for limestone cutting. The lever systems that allowed massive blocks to be adjusted into position. The surveying techniques that kept the pyramid's base square and the walls at the correct angle. All of this required knowledge, mathematics, experience that had been accumulated over generations of pyramid building. Because the Great Pyramid wasn't Egypt's first pyramid, it was the culmination of a century of pyramid construction, each project teaching lessons, each pharaoh trying to build bigger and better than his predecessor. The techniques you were using had been refined through multiple earlier projects. The stepped pyramid of Djoser, built a century earlier, taught basic pyramid construction. The bent pyramid, where the angle changed halfway up because the original angle was too steep, taught proper angle calculations. The red pyramid, with its successful smooth sides, taught the techniques that would be perfected at Giza. You were part of a tradition, whether you knew it or not, standing on the broken backs of workers who'd hauled stone for previous pharaohs. 20 years. The Great Pyramid took approximately 20 years to complete, from groundbreaking to the placement of the pyramidion, the capstone at the apex. 20 years of daily work, seasonal workforce fluctuations, millions of man, hours of labor, thousands of workers' lives consumed by the project. If you were conscripted at age 20, you'd be 40 when the pyramid was completed. If you survived, your youth gone, your body destroyed, your health ruined. But the pyramid standing, eternal and perfect, Khufu's legacy that would outlive everyone who built it. The completion itself was anticlimactic for most workers. The pharaoh held ceremonies. Priests blessed the finished monument. The capstone was placed with great ritual significance. But for you, for the haulers and the common workers, completion meant release. No more ramps, no more whips and dust, and bread and onions. You could go home, if home still existed, if your family was still alive, if you were capable of returning to normal life after years of pyramid construction. Many workers didn't return home. They stayed in the settlement, took jobs maintaining the pyramid complex, became permanent employees of the mortuary cult that would maintain Khufu's pyramid for centuries. This wasn't always by choice. Some workers were too injured to travel, too damaged to farm, too broken to do anything except stay and take whatever easy jobs the pyramid complex offered. Some workers had nowhere to return to, their villages gone, their families dead, their old lives erased by time and change. The pyramid stands actually, still standing 4,500 years later, still impressive, still drawing tourists who marvel at the engineering and wonder how it was built. The explanations focus on the clever techniques, the mathematical precision, the organizational achievement. They mention the workforce in abstract terms, numbers and labor estimates, the human cost reduced to statistics. They rarely talk about the individual workers, the specific men who hauled specific stone, who suffered specific injuries, who died specific deaths. But the workers were there, thousands of them, names mostly forgotten, lives compressed into archaeological evidence, bones in the workers' cemetery showing the physical toll, graffiti on the stones showing the human presence. They weren't aliens, weren't using lost advanced technology, weren't helped by anything except human muscle and simple machines and organizational skills. They were people, ordinary people, doing extraordinary work under brutal conditions because Pharaoh commanded it and they had no choice. And this was how pyramids were built. You were part of that. You hauled stone for years, felt the rope cut into your shoulders, tasted sand and sweat, heard the crack of overseers' whips, ate bread and onions, until you hated both, slept in crowded barracks, watched men die, survived, somehow. Contributed your labor to one of humanity's most enduring monuments. Your name isn't recorded. Your specific contributions aren't documented, but your work is there, visible in every stone block present in the structure itself. Your suffering literally built into the pyramid's foundation. The Great Pyramid contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks. If you worked for 10 years on the project, moving 3 blocks. Per Dalton Y on average, you personally moved about 7,500 blocks. That is 0.3% of the total. A tiny fraction, barely measurable, statistically insignificant. But multiply your contribution by thousands of workers, and suddenly the impossible becomes possible. The pyramid isn't a mystery. It is the result of massive human effort, organized labor, and the willingness to sacrifice workers' health and lives for Pharaoh's glory. And that is the truth that the documentaries skip over. The pyramids are impressive. They're also monuments to human suffering, built by ordinary people forced into extraordinary labor. Their bodies breaking under the weight of stones, their lives consumed by construction that benefited the pharaoh, but destroyed the workers. We admire the result, but forget the cost. We study the engineering, but ignore the engineer's willingness to treat humans as expendable tools. The pyramid builders weren't slaves in the traditional sense, weren't whipped and chained and worked to death arbitrarily, but they weren't free either. They were conscripted, compelled, coerced into labor that damaged them permanently, given minimal compensation and told they should feel honored to serve Pharaoh. It is a distinction that matters for historical accuracy, but doesn't change the fundamental reality. You spent years hauling stone you didn't want to haul, building a tomb you'd never benefit from, sacrificing your health so a pharaoh could have an impressive afterlife. Welcome to ancient Egypt, where the monuments are eternal and the workers who built them are forgotten. But let's go deeper into the specific daily experience, because the general horror of pyramid construction doesn't fully convey what it felt like to live it, hour by hour, day by day, for years of your life that you'll never get back. You wake before dawn, as always. The barracks is already stirring, men groaning as they sit up, joints cracking, backs protesting, bodies that feel older than their years. You slept maybe 4 hours interrupted sleep, because someone was coughing all night. That deep, wet cough, that means lung disease. That means he'll be dead within months, but he'll keep working until he can't anymore, because stopping means losing your food ration. You sit up on your reed mat, and immediately your back spasms. The pain is sharp, radiating from your lower spine, up to your shoulders, a reminder of yesterday's work and the day before, and every day for the past 3 years. You are 28 years old. You feel 50. Your father is 45, and in better physical condition than you are, because he stayed home farming, instead of getting conscripted for pyramid duty. Standing up takes effort. Your knees don't want to straighten, the cartilage worn down from years of pulling weight, from climbing ramps, from kneeling on stone, while you waited for your gang's turn to haul. You stand slowly, careful not to put too much weight on your left foot where you dropped a stone block last month, and broke 2 toes that healed crooked, because the physician just splinted them and told you to keep working. The pre-dawn air is already warm, promising another day where the heat will try to kill you. You shuffle outside with 40 other men, all of you moving stiffly, all of you damaged in various ways, all of you knowing that today will add to that damage, and tomorrow will be worse. The stars are still visible, beautiful if you had the energy to appreciate beauty, but you don't. You appreciate the fact that you woke up at all, that you survived another night, that you get to suffer for another day. The water distribution point is crowded. Hundreds of men lining up for their morning ration. You wait your turn, shuffling forward, finally receiving your measure, drinking it immediately even though it is warm and tastes like the copper container it was stored in and has particles of something floating in it that you don't examine too closely, because you don't want to know. The water is life. The water is also probably carrying diseases, but refusing to drink means dehydration, means death faster than disease. So you drink. Your work gang assembles as the sun breaks the horizon. 25 men. Same as yesterday, except there is a new guy replacing Amos who collapsed 3 days ago and hasn't recovered. You don't know if Amos died or just got sent home or is lying in the medical tent struggling to breathe. You don't ask. Knowing doesn't change anything. The new guy is young, maybe 18. Still has some fat on him, which means he is fresh from his village, hasn't been worked down to bone and sinew yet. Give him 2 months. He'll look like the rest of you. The overseer assigns your gang to hauling duty, same as always. You are pulling from the quarry to the base of the pyramid today. The relatively easy duty because at least it is level ground. Tomorrow you might be on ramp duty, hauling upward against gravity, and that is when the real suffering begins. But today is level ground, and you feel something like relief, which is pathetic, because level ground hauling still means 10 hours of pulling weight that is slowly crushing your spine. The walk to the quarry takes 15 minutes, passing other work gangs heading to their assignments, passing the pyramid itself, which is now over 200 feet tall, maybe halfway to its final height. You remember when you first arrived 3 years ago, and the pyramid was barely 50 feet high. You've watched it grow, block by block, layer by layer, your labor literally visible in the structure. It is impressive. You hate it. Both things are true. The block waiting for your gang today is larger than average, maybe 3 tons instead of 2.5. The overseer tells you this is a special block, destined for the king's chamber, needs to be moved today to stay on schedule. You don't care about the schedule. You care about the fact that 3 tons is 6,000 pounds. Heavier than anything else. You'll move this week, and your back is already screaming from just waking up. The block sits on its wooden sledge, ropes already attached. Your gang lines up along the ropes, spacing out, each man finding his position. You are in the middle of the line, which is the worst position, because you take the full force of the pull without the slight mechanical advantage of being at the front, or the slightly reduced load of being at the back. But you don't complain, because complaining earns you the whip and achieves nothing. The overseer walks the path, inspecting the water-wetted sand track. He is not satisfied with the wetness level in one section, calls over the water carriers, has them pour more water, spread it, pack it down. This takes 10 minutes. You wait, standing in the sun, which is already hot despite the early hour. Sweat beginning to form on your skin, the day's dehydration starting before the work even begins. Finally, the overseer signals. Your gang leans into the ropes. The chant leader begins the call, a rhythmic sound that coordinates the pull. You pull on the beat, all 25 men simultaneously applying force, and the block shifts, slowly, grudgingly, moving because you are forcing it to move, fighting inertia and friction, and the fundamental fact that 3-ton stones don't want to be dragged across the desert. Pull, step, pull, step, pull, step. The rope digs into your shoulder where you've wrapped it, cutting into the calluses that have formed over the old wounds, creating new wounds on top of old scars. The pain is immediate and will only get worse as the hours progress. You know this because you've done this thousands of times before. The pain is as predictable as sunrise. An hour into the haul, you've covered maybe half a mile. The sun is higher now, no longer friendly morning sun, but aggressive mid-morning heat. Temperature climbing past 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and heading for 110 degrees Fahrenheit by midday. Sweat pours off your body, soaking your linen kilt, dripping into the sand beneath your feet. You are losing water faster than you can replace it, dehydrating in real time. Your body's water content dropping percentage point by percentage point. The overseer calls a brief rest, 5 minutes to drink water. You don't sit down because sitting means your muscles will stiffen and standing back up will be agony. You stand in place, swaying slightly, accepting the water ration, drinking it so fast you barely taste it, wanting more but knowing more isn't coming. 5 minutes passes in what feels like 30 seconds. Back to the ropes, pull, step, the rhythm resuming, the block sliding forward. Your body screaming protest that you ignore, because stopping isn't an option. The new guy in your gang is struggling. You can see it, everyone can see it. He is not used to the pace, not used to the sustained effort. His soft farmer's muscles not yet adapted to pyramid work. He is pulling, but not pulling hard enough, creating slack in his section of rope, forcing the men around him to compensate for his weakness. The overseer sees it too. The whip cracks across the new guy's back. Not hard enough to break skin, but hard enough to hurt. Hard enough to motivate. The new guy gasps, pulls harder, finds strength he didn't know he had because pain is the excellent motivator. 3 hours in, the block gets stuck. The sledge hits a patch of sand that wasn't wetted properly. The friction increasing. Suddenly, the block grinding to a stop, despite your gang's continued pulling. The overseer curses, calls for more water, as the carriers soak the sand ahead of the block. Your gang waits, still holding the ropes, because releasing tension means the block might shift backward, and you'd have to start the pull again from zero momentum. While you wait, you look at your hands. They're bleeding. Again. The rope has worn through the calluses in a few spots, creating fresh wounds that sting with sweat and sand. Your hands are more scar tissue than original skin at this point. A map of damage accumulated over 3 years. You remember having hands that looked normal, that looked human. You are not sure what these hands look like anymore, except damaged. The water is applied, the sand prepared, the overseer signals. Your gang leans in, pulling harder this time, needing to overcome the static friction of the stuck block. For a moment, nothing happens. Then someone in your gang makes a sound between a grunt and a scream, pure effort vocalized, and the block lurches forward. You are moving again. Pull, step, the rhythm restored. The chant continuing, the work proceeding, because stopping doesn't make the pyramid build itself. Midday arrives with heat that feels physical, like a weight pressing down on you, trying to force you into the ground. The temperature has reached 110 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe higher on the sun-heated stone surfaces. You are beyond sweating heavily now, into the phase where sweat production is decreasing, because your body doesn't have enough water left to spare. This is dangerous. This is the condition that kills people. But you can't stop working, because the overseer hasn't called a rest, and stopping without permission means punishment. Your vision is starting to blur slightly. Heat exhaustion, setting in your core temperature, rising despite your body's efforts to cool itself. You focus on the back of the man in front of you, on keeping your feet moving, on maintaining the rhythm. Pull, step, everything else fades to background noise. The pain, the heat, the thirst, all of it becomes distant, your consciousness narrowing to the immediate task, because that is the only way to survive this. The midday rest comes finally. Blessed relief. 30 minutes to eat and drink and not pull ropes. You sit this time, your legs giving out. Sitting heavily on sand that is hot enough to burn, but you are too tired to care. The food is distributed, bread and onions, the same meal you've eaten for 1,000 days. The taste so familiar you don't even register it anymore. You eat mechanically, chewing and swallowing, getting calories into your body, because you'll need them for the afternoon haul. The water ration at midday is larger, a recognition that men are dying from heat, and corpses don't haul stones. You drink slowly this time, letting your body absorb the water, feeling it spread through your tissues, insufficient to fully rehydrate, but enough to keep you functional for a few more hours. Around you, other workers are doing the same. Hundreds of men sitting in whatever shade they can find, which is minimal, because shade on a flat plateau under Egyptian sun is rare. Some men aren't moving anymore. You see a worker being carried away, limp and unresponsive, either dead from heat stroke or close to it. This happens daily. The weak, the unlucky, the ones whose bodies just can't handle one more day of this, they collapse and don't get up. New workers arrive from conscription to replace them. The pyramid cares nothing for individual survival. The pyramid only cares about aggregate labor, about whether enough men are working to maintain the construction schedule. 30 minutes ends. The overseer stands, shouts for work gangs to resume. Your body doesn't want to stand, protests violently. But you force yourself up because staying down means the whip, and the whip just makes everything worse. You return to the ropes, your gang reassembling, the afternoon shift, beginning with everyone tired and heat, damaged, and knowing that the afternoon is going to be harder than the morning was. The afternoon haul is slower. Everyone is exhausted, depleted, operating on willpower and fear rather than actual physical capacity. The block moves, but the pace has dropped from 1 mile per H to maybe half that. The overseer pushes for speed, his whip cracking more frequently, hitting men who slow down, hitting men who stumble, creating pain to motivate speed, but also creating injuries that will make tomorrow harder. It is counterproductive, but the overseer doesn't care about tomorrow. He cares about today's quota. 4 hours into the afternoon shift, someone in a nearby gang falls. Not heat exhaustion, not collapse from dehydration. An actual accident. The rope his gang was pulling snapped under load, the sudden release of tension making everyone stumble, and one man stumbled wrong, fell wrong. The block he was pulling shifted on its sledge and rolled slightly, just a few inches of roll, but enough that the man's leg was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The scream is immediate and horrible, a sound of pain so intense it cuts through the worksite noise, makes everyone stop for a moment. The man is pinned, his leg trapped under the edge of a 3-ton block, bone and flesh crushed under weight that can't be quickly moved. His gang and several others rush to lift the block, using levers, lifting just enough to pull him out. But the damage is done. His leg is destroyed, bone visible, blood soaking into the sand, his screaming continuous and terrifying. The physicians arrive, carrying the man away on a stretcher, moving quickly toward the medical tent, where they'll assess whether the leg can be saved or needs amputation. You watch this happen, everyone watches. Then the overseer's shout and work resumes because accidents don't pause construction. And that man's misery doesn't excuse you from finishing your haul. But the scream stays with you, stays with everyone. That is the scream you hear in nightmares. The sound of a man whose body is being destroyed by the pyramid. That is the scream that could have been you, that might be you tomorrow, or next week, or any day when rope snaps or stone shifts, or you are in the wrong place at the wrong moment. The pyramid is built on precision engineering and careful planning, but it is also built on accidents and injuries and the statistical certainty that some percentage of workers will be destroyed by the work. Sunset finally arrives, the workday ending as the sun sets. 12 hours of hauling completed, your gang's quota met. You've moved 3 blocks today, a standard day's work. Nothing exceptional. You've hauled approximately 9 tons of stone across maybe 2 miles of distance. The numbers sound modest until you factor in that you did it by hand, with ropes, your body providing the force, your spine compressing under the sustained load, your muscles tearing microscopically and rebuilding wrong, creating damage that accumulates. The walk back to the barracks is quiet. Your gang doesn't talk, because talking requires energy that none of you have. You shuffle along, a line of damaged men, heading to a crowded mud, brick building where you'll eat bread and onions again, drink beer that is more liquid bread than alcohol, and try to sleep despite the heat and the pain and the man next to you coughing blood. Evening, meal is distributed at the barracks. The bread tonight is particularly gritty, full of stone particles from the grain grinding, and you can feel it grinding down your teeth as you chew. Your teeth are already damaged, worn down from years of gritty bread, several cracked from accidental hits during work, one molar lost entirely to an abscess that the physician couldn't save. Eating is painful but necessary. You eat. The beer is weak, barely alcoholic, but it is wet, and it is calories, and it is not water that might kill you, so you drink it. The taste is sour, yeasty, unpleasant in a familiar way. You've drunk thousands of measures of this beer. You'll drink thousands more before your conscription ends, if you survive that long. The beer is as much a part of pyramid construction as the stones themselves. After eating, there is maybe 2 hours before you should sleep to get any rest before tomorrow's pre-dawn wake-up. Some men use this time to socialize, talking in quiet voices about their villages, their families, their lives before conscription. Some men maintain small craft projects, carving pieces of wood or stone, creating small objects that remind them they're still individuals with skills beyond hauling. Some men pray, asking gods for survival, for strength, for release from this obligation. You mostly just sit, staring at nothing, too tired to socialize, too depleted to craft, too skeptical to pray. Your body aches in a dozen places. Each ache its own specific pain with its own specific cause. Your shoulders where the rope cut in, your back where the vertebrae compressed, your knees where the cartilage wore down, your hands where the skin tore, your feet where the calluses cracked. Pain is your constant companion, has been for 3 years, will be until you die, or the pyramid is completed, or you become too injured to work. Night falls, bringing marginal relief from the heat. The temperature drops to maybe 85 degrees Fahrenheit, still hot, but not the deadly heat of midday. The stars come out, brilliant in the unpolluted ancient sky, beautiful and completely irrelevant to your situation. You lie down on your reed mat, trying to find a position that doesn't hurt, failing because every position hurts, just in different ways. Sleep comes fitfully. You are exhausted enough to sleep, but in too much pain to sleep well. You drift in and out, caught in a state between sleep and wakefulness, dreaming confused dreams about hauling stones that never end, about ropes that cut deeper than skin, about falling from the pyramid's height and waking before impact. The man to your left is coughing, that deep wet cough, blood probably, lung disease from the stone dust. The man to your right is snoring, loud raspy snores that would be annoying if you had energy for annoyance. Midnight passes, 2 a.m., 4 a.m. Time measured in discomfort, in brief periods of unconsciousness, interrupted by pain or noise, or the need to urinate, which means stumbling outside to the latrine pit and stumbling back and trying to sleep again. Dawn approaches, inevitable and unwelcome. You have maybe 30 minutes before the foreman starts waking everyone. 30 minutes left to not be working, to not be hauling stone, to not be destroying your body in service to Pharaoh's tomb. And then the foreman is shouting, kicking mat, and it is time to start again. Another day. Same as yesterday. Same as tomorrow will be. Pull, step, until your conscription ends or your body breaks entirely, whichever comes first. This is your life now. This has been your life for 3 years. This will be your life for however many more years the pyramid takes to complete. You are one of thousands, one worker in a vast machine that converts human labor into geometric architecture. You matter only as labor unit, as a body capable of pulling ropes, as muscles and bones that can be used until they're used up. The pyramid grows block by block. Each block represents dozens of man. Hours of labor represents rope burns and back injuries and sweat and pain. The structure rises toward the sky, impressive and eternal, built on a foundation of human suffering that will be forgotten long before the stones erode. Future generations will look at the Great Pyramid and wonder how it was built, and they'll study the engineering and marvel at the mathematics and theorize about the techniques. Very few will think about you, about the specific individual workers whose specific bodies were ground down to build it. But you were there. You pulled the ropes. You felt the stone dust in your lungs. You heard the crack of the overseer's whip. You ate bread and onions for years. You watched men die from heat and accidents and disease. You survived somehow, and your survival meant you got to keep suffering, keep hauling, keep contributing your labor to Pharaoh's eternal monument. The Great Pyramid is a wonder of the ancient world, one of the few monuments from antiquity that survives largely intact. It is a testament to human ambition, to organizational capability, to mathematical precision. It is also a testament to human capacity for forcing labor, for treating people as expendable resources, for sacrificing workers' health and lives in pursuit of architectural achievement. Both interpretations are correct. The pyramid is simultaneously wonderful and terrible, impressive and horrifying, a monument to human achievement and human suffering. And you are part of both aspects. Your labor made the achievement possible. Your suffering is built into the foundation. The stones you moved are still there, still bearing weight, still performing their function 4,500 years later. Your name is forgotten. Your specific pain is unrecorded. Your individual contribution is unmeasured. But you were there. You did the work. You paid the price. Now let's talk about ramp duty. Because if hauling on level ground was brutal, hauling up the ramps was exponentially worse. A special kind of hell that made horizontal hauling look easy by comparison. The ramps are massive earthen structures built from limestone chips, gypsum mortar, and desert sand, compacted into an incline that spirals around the pyramid or approaches from one side, depending on the construction phase. At the height you are working at now, the ramp is maybe 100 feet above ground level, which means you are hauling stones up a structure that is itself a significant construction project. Walking on a surface that is maybe 30 feet wide with a sheer drop on one side and the pyramid's face on the other. There are no railings, no safety barriers, no protection between you and a 100-foot fall except your own balance and the hope that you don't slip. The edges of the ramp are marked with painted lines, white limestone paint on the ramp's surface, a visual indicator of where safe ends and deadly begins. You've learned to never get closer to that line than absolutely necessary, to always stay toward the pyramid side of the ramp, because the wind at height can push you, the rope can pull you, a moment of imbalance can send you over the edge. You've seen men fall. Everyone has. The falls are quick, almost too quick to process. One moment a worker is there, the next moment he is gone, tumbling over the edge. The scream cutting off suddenly when he hits the ground. The body is removed, the blood is covered with sand, and work continues, because the pyramid doesn't pause for individual deaths, and the quota must be met regardless of casualties. Your gang is assigned a block destined for the 90th course, which means hauling it up the ramp to about 95 feet of elevation. The ramp's incline is approximately 110, meaning for every 10 feet of horizontal distance, you travel 1 foot vertically. To reach 95 feet requires 950 feet of ramp length. That is almost a fifth of a mile, uphill, dragging a 2.5-ton block. The gang for ramp hauling is larger, 40 men instead of 25, because gravity is now your enemy in ways it wasn't on level ground. Every foot of elevation gained is a foot that gravity wants to pull the block back down. If your gang loses momentum, if everyone doesn't pull simultaneously, the block will slide backward. And if you are not fast enough to get out of the way, you'll be crushed between the block and whatever's behind you. The hauling begins at the base of the ramp. 40 men line up along the ropes, the formation longer than horizontal hauling, stretching maybe 60 feet from the front of the block to the last hauler. You are positioned about 2/3 back. Not the strongest position, but not the weakest. Somewhere in the middle of the pack, where your contribution matters, but your failure wouldn't doom the entire haul. The overseer signals. The chant begins. A different rhythm than horizontal hauling, slower and more deliberate, timing the pulls to maximize coordinated force. You lean into the rope, your body angled forward more than horizontal hauling, your legs driving against the ramp surface, pushing yourself up the incline while simultaneously pulling the block. The resistance is immediate and brutal. The block fights every inch of elevation, gravity pulling it downward with force that increases with the angle. Your legs burn within minutes, the sustained uphill climb, while pulling weight creating a metabolic demand your body can barely meet. Your lungs gasp for air, the physical exertion requiring oxygen faster than you can breathe it in. Your heart pounds, racing at a rate that would concern a modern physician, but is just normal for pyramid ramp work. 50 feet up the ramp, maybe 10 feet of elevation gained, and you're already exhausted. Your legs are shaking, your breathing is ragged. Sweat is pouring off you despite the morning coolness. The rope has cut through your shoulder calluses again, creating a wound that will weep fluid for the rest of the day and hurt worse tomorrow. But you are only 10% done with this haul. You have another 850 feet to go, another 85 feet of elevation to climb, another several hours of sustained maximum effort. The ramp surface is not smooth. It is compacted debris, gypsum chips, sand and limestone fragments, creating a texture that is rough under your bare feet, that shifts slightly under weight, that requires constant attention to maintain footing. Slip here and you'll fall, either forward into the man in front of you, creating a cascade failure, or sideways toward the edge where a 100-foot drop awaits. You watch your footing obsessively, every step deliberate, your attention split between pulling the rope and not dying. At 200 feet along the ramp, the overseer calls a brief rest. You don't release the ropes because releasing means the block might slide backward. Instead, wooden chocks are wedged under the sledge's runners, blocking the backward slide, transferring the weight to the chocks instead of to your gang. Only then do you release the rope, your hands cramping from the sustained grip, your fingers not wanting to uncurl from the position they've held for the past 30 minutes. The water ration is distributed. You drink greedily, your body desperately dehydrated from the exertion, despite the relatively cool morning temperature. The rest lasts 5 minutes, not nearly enough time for your muscles to recover, but enough that you are not actively dying. Then the chocks are removed, the ropes are taken up again, and the haul resumes. The second segment is worse than the first because you are already tired. The initial strength you had is depleted, your muscles running on reserves, your body breaking down glycogen and starting to cannibalize muscle tissue for energy. The pain intensifies, your legs burning with lactic acid buildup, your shoulders screaming from the rope damage, your back spasming from the sustained loading, and the height is getting serious now. You are 40 feet above ground level, high enough that falling would probably kill you. The wind is stronger up here, less blocked by the plateau and the structures below, creating gusts that push against you, threatening your balance, making the rope sway slightly. You lean toward the pyramid side of the ramp, staying away from the edge, but the formation of your gang means you can't get too far from the edge, or you'll interfere with the men in front of you. At 500 feet along the ramp, roughly halfway to your destination, someone ahead of you collapses, just stops pulling, legs giving out, falling to his knees and then forward onto his face. The formation breaks, the pull becomes uncoordinated, the block shifts on its sledge and starts to slide backward. The panic is immediate. If the block slides backward with momentum, it will crush everyone behind it, including you. The overseer is screaming for chocks, for men to wedge the block, for the gang to pull harder to arrest the slide. Your gang leans desperately into the ropes, 40 men pulling with every remaining ounce of strength, feet slipping on the ramp surface, the block sliding slowly backward, despite your efforts. The chocks get under the runners just in time, slamming into place, the block's weight transferring to the wooden wedges with a crunch that sounds like breaking bones. The block stops sliding, held by the chocks, the immediate crisis averted. The collapsed worker is dragged to the side, unconscious from heat exhaustion, or heart failure, or simple physical depletion. A replacement is pulled from the reserve workers who follow each gang for exactly this reason. The haul resumes within 10 minutes. The collapsed worker left lying on the ramp's edge, hopefully alive, possibly dying. Definitely not your problem, because the block must reach its destination. The final 400 feet of ramp is a test of pure willpower over physical capacity. Your body is failing, muscles trembling, vision starting to narrow from exhaustion. Your breathing shallow and rapid, like an animal that has been run to ground. You are no longer consciously pulling, just maintaining your position in the formation, holding the rope. Your body moving automatically, while your mind retreats somewhere distant where there is no pain and no ramps and no pyramid. The summit of the ramp arrives unexpectedly because you've stopped tracking progress, stopped counting steps, stopped doing anything except surviving the next moment. Suddenly, the incline levels out, the pulling resistance decreases, and you are on the pyramid's working surface, the 90th course where the block will be positioned. The overseer signals release. You let go of the rope, your hand staying in curved position, because the muscles have locked, and you collapse where you stand, because your legs can't hold you anymore. You lie on the limestone surface, chest heaving, heart racing, body completely spent, and the sun is only at mid-morning. You have the rest of the day ahead of you, more halls, more ramps, more blocks, because one hall per Dalton. Why wouldn't build the pyramid fast enough? You'll rest for 30 minutes, maybe an hour if the overseer is merciful, and then you'll descend the ramp and start again. The descent is its own danger. Going down the ramp without a block to haul should be easier, and physically it is, but psychologically it is worse, because you can see the drop, can see exactly how far you'd fall if you slipped, can watch the edge of the ramp and imagine tumbling over. Men who are steady during the upward haul sometimes break on the descent, the fear overwhelming them, causing them to freeze or panic, or actually fall from the psychological pressure of heights. You descend carefully, staying far from the edge, watching your footing, one hand trailing along the pyramid's face as a balance reference. The descent takes 20 minutes faster than the haul, but still requiring concentration and effort. At the base, your gang reassembles, receives the next assignment, and the cycle continues. Ramped duty rotation is typically 1 day in 4, meaning 3 days of horizontal hauling for every 1 day of ramp work. This rotation exists because ramp work destroys workers faster than horizontal hauling, and even the overseers recognize that you can't sustain maximum exertion daily without killing workers so fast that replacement can't keep up. 1 day in 4 is the calculated balance between productivity and worker survival. But 1 day in 4 of ramp hauling over months and years accumulates damage that doesn't heal. Your knees subjected to the uphill climbing while pulling weight. Develop chronic inflammation, the cartilage wearing away, bone starting to grind on bone, creating pain that never fully subsides. Your cardiovascular system, pushed to maximum repeatedly, develops problems that won't manifest fully until years later, but are being created now. Your psychological state, subjected to the height fear and the falling deaths and the sustained maximum effort, develops anxiety that makes ramp duty progressively more terrifying even as you become more experienced. The skilled masons who work at the top of the pyramid, positioning the blocks you haul up, have it better than you in some ways and worse in others. They're not hauling, not destroying their backs and knees with sustained heavy labor, but they're working at height every day, not 1 day in 4, perched on the pyramid's edge, fitting multi-ton blocks with millimeter precision, 1 misstep or 1 block shift away from death. Their casualty rate from falls is higher than yours. Your casualty rate from physical breakdown is higher than theirs. Different jobs, different ways of being destroyed. The engineering precision required at the top is remarkable and achieved through techniques that are conceptually simple but practically demanding. Each block must be fitted to its neighbors, so exactly that the gaps are minimal, creating the structural integrity that allows the pyramid to support its own weight without mortar. The masons achieve this through a combination of measuring tools, experienced eye, and brute force adjustment. A block arrives at the working surface, delivered by your gang or another gang, positioned roughly where it needs to go. The master mason inspects the space where it will fit, examines the neighboring blocks already in place, and makes calculations that are part mathematics and part experience. He marks the new block, indicating where it needs to be trimmed, where the angles need adjusting, how much material to remove. The trimming is done with copper chisels and wooden mallets, the mason working carefully to remove limestone without damaging the block's structural integrity. Copper is soft, dulls quickly, requires constant sharpening. A mason might go through a dozen copper chisels in a day, wearing them down to nubs, each chisel representing precious metal that has to be smelted and shaped and delivered to the construction site. Once trimmed, the block is positioned, levered into place using wooden poles, rocked and adjusted until it fits exactly against its neighbours. The fit is checked by trying to slide thin measuring tools into the gaps. If the tool slides in, the fit isn't tight enough, more adjustment is needed. The process can take hours for a single block. The mason's working with patience. That seems impossible, given the pressure to maintain construction pace. But the masons are skilled workers respected for their expertise, given better food and accommodation than you receive. They've trained for years to develop the knowledge and physical intuition needed for precision stone fitting. You've trained for nothing, were conscripted from farming, given minimal instruction, and expected to haul until your body breaks. The class difference is stark even among pyramid workers. The hierarchy extends all the way down. The masons look down on the haulers as unskilled muscle. The haulers look down on the water carriers as having even less status, even though water carrying is essential work without which everyone would die. The water carriers look down on the latrine workers who maintain the sanitation, even though sanitation prevents disease outbreaks. Everyone looks down on someone, creating a pecking order that gives even the lowest status workers someone to feel superior to. At the top of the worker hierarchy are the scribes, the educated men who record everything. Blocks delivered, workers present, rations distributed, accidents occurred. Everything that happens on the construction site is documented in hieratic script on papyrus or ostraca. The scribes don't do physical labour, don't haul stone, or carry water, or maintain latrines. They sit in whatever shade exists, recording, calculating, reporting to the architects and overseers who manage the project. The scribes are literate, which in ancient Egypt means they're elite. Literacy is rare, restricted to maybe 1% of the population, requiring years of education that only wealthy families can provide. The scribes on the pyramid site are here because it is a prestigious assignment, working on Pharaoh's grand project, a job that will look good in their careers. They'll go on to administrative positions, temple roles, comfortable lives enabled by the education their families purchased for them. You can't read, can't write, can barely count beyond the numbers needed for your daily life. Education wasn't available in your village, wasn't an option for a farmer's son. Your literacy is your body, your education is physical labour, and your career is hauling stone until you are too broken to continue. The scribe who records your gang's work doesn't see you as a person, sees you as a labour unit, a number to record, a resource to be tracked and utilised. The resentment is present but unexpressed, because expressing resentment toward higher status individuals means punishment. You haul, the scribes record, the masons build, the overseers manage, and the architects design. Each level of the hierarchy insulated from the levels below. Each level necessary, but not equal in treatment or respect or compensation or survival rate. Pharaoh himself never visits the construction site. Khufu is in his palace at Memphis, living in luxury funded by the agricultural surplus that Egypt's farmers produce, including the surplus your village produces when you are not conscripted for pyramid duty. He is aware of the pyramid's progress through reports the architects send, papyrus scrolls with detailed updates on blocks placed, current height achieved, projected completion timeline. The reports don't mention individual workers, don't discuss your suffering, don't acknowledge the human cost, except as abstract casualty statistics that are acceptably low as long as construction pace is maintained. Khufu believes genuinely that he is building his eternal resting place, his gateway to the afterlife, his assurance of immortality. The religious conviction is real for him. The pyramid's purpose, sacred and cosmically significant. That the pyramid's construction requires human suffering is unfortunate, but necessary, a cost that must be paid, no different from the tax burden, or the military conscription, or any of the other obligations that subjects owe to Pharaoh. His architects have assured him that workers are treated fairly, given adequate food and shelter, that casualties are minimal and unavoidable. He believes these assurances because they tell him what he wants to believe, and contradicting Pharaoh with unpleasant truths isn't a career. Advancing strategy. The architects who do visit the construction site regularly, know the truth better than Pharaoh, but have their own incentives to minimize the human cost in their reports. They're judged on their ability to complete the pyramid on schedule and within budget. Worker suffering isn't a metric they're evaluated on. Worker survival rate matters only insofar as it affects labor availability. As long as conscription brings in workers as fast as attrition removes them, the human cost is acceptable from a project management perspective. This is the reality of massive construction projects in ancient civilizations. The structures we admire today, the pyramids and temples and monuments, were built by hierarchical societies that treated human labor as an expendable resource. The societies weren't uniquely cruel by ancient standards. They were typical. What is unique about the Egyptian pyramids is their scale and preservation, not the methods used to build them. Similar human cost was paid for similar monuments across ancient civilizations, from Mesopotamian ziggurats to Mesoamerican pyramids to Chinese emperors' tombs. Impressive architecture built on human suffering is not an Egyptian innovation. It is a human universal. But knowing that other civilizations treated workers similarly doesn't make your specific experience less brutal. You are not being crushed by comparative history or abstract analysis. You are being crushed by specific limestone blocks in specific ways under specific Egyptian sun, while eating specific bread and onions and drinking specific wheat beer. Your suffering is concrete and immediate. And the fact that hypothetical workers building hypothetical structures elsewhere also suffered doesn't change the pain in your actual back or the actual blood from your actual hands. The seasons bring variations in suffering, different flavors of misery depending on the time of year. Summer, as mentioned, is heat hell. Temperatures that kill through hypothermia, the work slowing because human bodies can't function at maximum output when core temperature is elevated. But summer is also dry, which means the stone dust stays airborne longer, creating respiratory problems that peak during the hot months. The flood season, when the Nile inundates the valley and you are conscripted from farming to pyramid work, brings cooler temperatures and higher humidity. The work is slightly more survivable temperature, wise, but the humidity creates its own problems. Sweat doesn't evaporate as efficiently in humid air, so cooling is less effective. The increased moisture encourages mold and bacteria in the crowded barracks, creating disease conditions that spread through the workforce. Respiratory infections peak during flood season, men coughing and feverish, but still working because stopping work means losing rations. Winter, the cool season from December to February, is the least hostile time for pyramid construction. Temperatures drop to genuinely comfortable levels, 60s and 70s during the day, cool enough at night that you need a blanket. The work is still brutal, still backbreaking, still dangerous, but without the heat trying to kill you simultaneously, it is survivable in ways that summer work isn't productivity. Peaks during winter, the cooler temperatures allowing workers to sustain effort longer, blocks moving faster, the pyramid growing more rapidly during these few months. But winter also brings windstorms, the Khamsin winds that blow across the desert carrying sand and dust, creating conditions where visibility drops to feet and working becomes impossible. The windstorms shut down construction for days at a time, the workforce huddled in barracks while sand infiltrates every space, covering everything, getting into food and water and lungs and eyes. When the storm passes, days of cleanup are needed before work can resume, and those lost days have to be made up through increased pace once construction restarts. The Nile's annual cycle dominates Egyptian life, including pyramid construction logistics. During flood season, when the Nile is high, barges can transport massive stones from distant quarries, floating them on the river and its flood channels to points near the construction site. The granite blocks from Aswan, used for the king's chamber and other internal structures, can only be transported during flood season, requiring careful scheduling to have the right stones arrive at the right time for installation. The granite blocks are heavier than limestone, some weighing 70 tons or more, requiring specialized handling techniques and massive gangs of haulers. You've never been assigned to granite hauling, which is both fortunate and unfortunate. Fortunate because granite hauling is even more dangerous and destructive than limestone hauling. Unfortunate because granite haulers receive better rations in recognition of the increased difficulty, and your rations are barely sufficient as it is. The food quantity you receive is calculated, like everything else, to maximize productivity per unit cost. You get enough calories to perform heavy labor without immediately collapsing, but not enough to fully recover from the daily damage. not enough to build reserves, not enough to be comfortable or satisfied. Chronic hunger is normal, a constant background state. Your stomach never quite full, your body always craving more food than you are given. The bread is filling but nutritionally inadequate. It is primarily carbohydrates, giving quick energy that burns off fast, providing minimal protein, or fats, or vitamins. The onions provide some nutrients, some vitamin C that helps prevent scurvy, some fiber that aids digestion. But they're not a complete nutrition source. The beer provides calories and carbohydrates, but little else. You are technically fed, technically given enough to survive, but you are malnourished in ways that manifest slowly over months and years. Your muscle mass has decreased since you arrived, your body cannibalizing muscle tissue to fuel the work when food calories are insufficient. You look lean, which might seem healthy until you realize you are lean because you are starving. Your body fat percentage dangerously low. Your muscles stringy and dense from constant use, but smaller than they should be for someone doing heavy labor. You look like a distance runner, not like a construction worker, because your body has adapted to chronic caloric deficit by shedding any mass that isn't absolutely essential. The vitamin deficiencies are starting to manifest. Your gums bleed when you bite into hard bread, early scurvy from inadequate vitamin C, despite the onions. Your night vision is deteriorating, vitamin A deficiency, affecting your eyes, making it harder to navigate in the darkness. More likely you'll trip or fall during nighttime movements. Your bones ache, possibly vitamin D deficiency, despite the abundant sunshine, or possibly just the accumulated damage from hauling. Hard to distinguish between nutritional problems and mechanical problems when everything hurts. The physicians at the site do what they can with the tools and knowledge available to them. Ancient Egyptian medicine is surprisingly advanced in some ways and limited in others. The physicians understand anatomy reasonably well, have documented surgical procedures, use a variety of herbal remedies that have real pharmacological effects. But they're working without antibiotics, without anesthesia except alcohol or opium, without germ theory or understanding of vitamins or modern diagnostic tools. A worker with a broken bone might have it set reasonably well, splinted, given time to heal if the break is simple and the physician is skilled. A worker with a wound might have it cleaned and bandaged, treated with honey, which actually has antibacterial properties, even though the physicians don't understand why. A worker with heat stroke might be cooled and rehydrated, receiving treatment that is remarkably similar to modern protocols, because the symptoms and solutions are obvious, even without detailed physiological knowledge. But a worker with an infection that needs antibiotics will die. A worker with appendicitis will die. A worker with severe internal injuries will die. A worker with advanced nutritional deficiency diseases will die. The mortality from conditions that are treatable with modern medicine, but were death sentences in ancient Egypt, is significant, adding to the casualty rate from accidents and heat and simple physical exhaustion. The physicians prioritize workers who can return to productivity. A broken arm that will heal in 6 weeks gets treatment because you'll be able to work again. A crushed leg that will never heal properly might get amputated if gangrene is developing. But you won't receive ongoing care because you are no longer useful as a hauler. The calculation is brutal, but logical from the project's perspective. Medical resources are limited, and spending them on workers who can return to productivity maximizes labor availability. You've been fortunate so far, 3 years of pyramid work with no major injuries, just the accumulated minor damage that everyone experiences. Scarred hands, damaged back, worn knees, depleted nutrition, respiratory problems from stone dust. But nothing catastrophic, nothing that prevents you from hauling. You are a successful worker by pyramid standards, which is a depressing metric of success, measuring your value by your continued ability to destroy your body for Pharaoh's monument. Your village seems distant now, almost unreal. Your memories of farming and family and a life that didn't involve hauling stones fading from vividness. You've been gone 3 years. Will probably be gone at least 2 more years until the pyramid's completion. 5 years total, conscripted during your prime physical years, 25 to 30, years you should have spent building a family and establishing your farm and living a normal life. Instead, you are here, hauling stones, aging prematurely, your body damaged in ways that will affect you permanently. Your wife, if you were married before conscription, is managing the farm alone or with help from relatives. She doesn't know your current condition, doesn't know that you've been injured repeatedly, doesn't know that your body is breaking down, doesn't know if you are even alive, because communication between the pyramid site and distant villages is irregular and unreliable. You might be dead for weeks before she receives word. She might be dead and you wouldn't know, continuing to haul stones in ignorance of her passing. If you had children before conscription, they're growing up without you. A 3-year-old when you left is now 6, old enough to barely remember you, your face fading from memory, replaced by whatever stories your wife tells about the father who went to build Pharaoh's pyramid. By the time you return, if you return, your children will be strangers, and you'll be a strange damaged man claiming to be their father, expecting recognition and affection that young children don't automatically give to strangers. The emotional toll of separation adds to the physical toll of labor. You are not just exhausted and in pain. You are lonely, isolated from family and community, living among thousands of other workers, but lacking genuine connection, because everyone is too depleted to form meaningful relationships. The work gangs develop camaraderie, born of shared suffering, but it is not the same as family or friendship, more like fellow survivors of a disaster, recognizing each other's humanity while lacking energy for anything deeper. Some workers break emotionally before they break physically. Men who stop eating, who stop trying to protect themselves from injury, who become passive and accept death as preferable to continuation. These men usually die within weeks, from accidents or disease or simple failure to thrive. The physicians have no treatment for emotional breakdown, no understanding of depression as a medical condition rather than moral failing. A man who gives up is just weak in the physician's understanding, unworthy of resources that could go to workers with better attitudes. You've considered giving up moments of despair when the pain and exhaustion and hopelessness become overwhelming, when continuing seems more difficult than simply stopping. But you've continued, day after day, for reasons that aren't always clear even to yourself. Partially, it is the fear of punishment, the knowledge that stopping work means whipping or worse. Partially, it is the hope of returning home, seeing family, reclaiming whatever life you left behind. Partially, it is just habit, inertia, the body continuing because that is what bodies do. Survival instinct operating even when conscious mind has given up. The pyramid is over halfway complete now, the structure rising to maybe 250 feet, roughly half its final height. The work accelerates as the pyramid rises because the upper portions require less material than the base, each successive course containing fewer blocks. But the work also becomes harder because every block must now be hauled up longer ramps to greater heights, the difficulty increasing even as the total volume decreases. The final years of construction will be faster in terms of blocks placed, but harder in terms of effort required per block. The completion timeline is constantly discussed among workers, a topic of speculation and hope and dread. Hope because completion means release, return to your village, end of the daily suffering. Dread because completion means years more of this, years more of hauling stones, years more of watching your body deteriorate. The architects say 5 more years. The workers suspect longer, knowing that construction schedules are optimistic and delays are inevitable, and the actual completion will probably take 7 or 8 years from now. Can you survive that long? Physically, possibly. If you avoid major accidents and diseases, and if your accumulated damage doesn't reach critical levels. Psychologically, you are less certain. 3 years has already eroded your mental state significantly. 5 to 8 more years might break you completely. Turn you into one of those hollow men who haul stones mechanically, but have nothing left behind their eyes. Personalities erased by the work. Humanity reduced to basic function. The architectural achievement happening around you is remarkable, if you had the mental space to appreciate it. The pyramid's base is almost perfectly square, the sides aligned to cardinal directions with precision that is astonishing given the Bronze Age tools available. The slope angle is precisely calculated, 51 degrees and 52 minutes, maintaining structural stability while creating the smooth geometric profile that defines a true pyramid. The internal chambers and passages are engineering marvels, corbelled ceilings supporting immense weight, air shafts providing ventilation. The king's chamber positioned exactly where calculations determined it should be, but you don't appreciate the achievement because you are too busy being destroyed by it. The precision that future scholars will admire was achieved through exact specifications that meant rejection of blocks that didn't fit perfectly. That meant additional hauling when blocks arrived wrong. That meant increased work to meet impossible standards. The architectural glory is built on worker misery. And from your perspective at the bottom of the hierarchy, the glory is irrelevant compared to the misery. Let's talk about what happens when you can't work anymore, because injury or illness or age eventually makes every worker useless. And the system's response is brutally pragmatic. Workers who become unable to haul stones have limited options, none of them good. If the injury is temporary, something that will heal in weeks or a month, you might be assigned to lighter duty, water carrying or food distribution or latrine maintenance. Jobs that still need doing but don't require hauling capacity. Your rations are reduced during this period because you are providing less value, and the reduced food slows your recovery, creating a vicious cycle that many workers don't escape. If the injury is permanent but you are still mobile, you might be kept on as support staff, doing the jobs that skilled workers would consider beneath them, and haulers are too valuable to waste on. You become part of the pyramid's permanent labour force, the men who maintain the workers' settlement, who cook the communal meals, who repair the barracks, who clean the latrines. It is work that needs doing, and using broken haulers for it is economical from the administrator's perspective. If the injury is severe enough that you can't work at all, you are sent home, assuming you can travel. The journey from Giza back to your village is yours to manage. No transportation provided, no assistance given. If your village is nearby, maybe you can walk it. If your village is in Upper Egypt, hundreds of miles away, and you are crippled and unable to walk long distances, you are simply released at the edge of the workers' settlement and left to figure out survival on your own. Many don't make it home. They die along the route, or they settle in the nearest village, becoming beggars, or taking whatever work their damaged bodies can still perform. No compensation is provided for injury. No pension exists for workers damaged by pyramid construction. You gave years of your life, destroyed your body, sacrificed your health, and the payment is your original conscription agreement, food and shelter during your service. Once you are no longer serving, you are no longer the pyramid's responsibility. The system used you up and now discards you, moving on to the next conscript, the next body to be worn down and eventually thrown away. The workers' cemetery near the pyramid contains thousands of graves, simple pit burials, bodies wrapped in reed mats or cheap linen, interred without ceremony beyond what fellow workers might provide. The cemetery is organized in rows, efficient use of space. No individual markers for most graves, because individual identity doesn't matter once you are dead. A few graves have simple inscriptions, workers who had some status or whose families paid for basic memorials. But most are anonymous, the men who built the pyramid reduced to unmarked bones in the sand. Archaeological excavation of the workers' cemetery has revealed what the ancient records don't discuss. The skeletons show evidence of severe arthritis in load, bearing joints, compressed vertebrae, healed fractures, nutritional deficiencies, respiratory diseases from dust exposure, and trauma injuries. The age at death clusters in the 30s and 40s, significantly younger than Egyptians, who didn't work on the pyramid. The evidence is clear. Pyramid construction shortened lives, destroyed health, and killed workers who might have lived decades longer doing other work. But the dead workers built something that outlasted them by millennia. Their suffering was temporary, ending with death. The pyramid is permanent, or as permanent as human construction can be, standing 4,500 years later, outliving everyone who built it by thousands of years. In that sense, the workers achieved a kind of immortality, their labour preserved in stone even though their names are forgotten. Whether that immortality is meaningful or just another cruelty, making the workers' suffering eternal by preserving the product of it, is a philosophical question that doesn't have a comfortable answer. The religious beliefs that motivated the construction were genuine for the Egyptians involved, pharaoh and architect and priest, and possibly even some workers. The pyramid wasn't just a tomb, it was a machine for achieving eternal life, a technology for transforming the pharaoh's mortal body into an immortal Ak spirit that would join the gods. The belief was real, the conviction absolute, the willingness to sacrifice resources and lives justified by the cosmic importance of Pharaoh's successful transition to the afterlife. For the workers, the religious justification might have provided meaning, might have made the suffering bearable by framing it as sacred duty rather than mere exploitation. If you believed that your labor was enabling Pharaoh's eternal life, that your suffering had cosmic significance, that you were participating in divine work, then maybe the pain was worth it. Maybe. But that is a big maybe. Religious conviction varies. Some workers were true believers, genuinely devoted to Pharaoh and the gods, seeing pyramid work as the highest honor, despite the suffering. Other workers were skeptical, seeing the religious narrative as propaganda designed to make them compliant, believing in the gods, but doubting that the gods required such human cost. And some workers lost their faith entirely, the suffering too intense to reconcile with any benevolent cosmic order, the gods either absent or cruel, the religious explanations hollow when you are being crushed by stone blocks. Your own faith, if you had any to begin with, has been eroded by 3 years of pyramid work. You still perform the religious observations expected of you, make offerings to gods when materials are available, recite prayers during the ceremonies the priests conduct. But the devotion is mechanical, habits maintained without conviction, actions performed because not performing them is dangerous, but not because you believe they matter. The gods feel distant, irrelevant to your immediate reality of pain and exhaustion and damaged body. If the gods exist, they're not here, not in the heat and dust and suffering of pyramid construction. The completion of the pyramid, when it finally happens years from now, will be celebrated with enormous ceremony. Pharaoh will conduct rituals consecrating the structure. Priests will bless the monument, the capstone pyramidion, possibly gilded with electrum to catch the sun, will be placed at the apex in a ceremony of cosmic significance. The event will be documented in inscriptions, recorded in temple archives, remembered as one of Pharaoh's great achievements. You probably won't be there for it. By the time the pyramid is completed, you'll either be dead or sent home before completion, or so broken that you are not working on the final courses. The workers who place the final blocks who witness the completion ceremony will be the ones who arrived later, who happen to still be functional when the work ends. You'll be wherever damaged workers go, trying to salvage whatever life you can from the years that remain after pyramid service. And even if you somehow survive and witness the completion, even if you are present for the ceremony, you won't be acknowledged. The inscriptions will credit Pharaoh for commissioning the work, the architects for designing it, possibly some high-ranking administrators for managing the project. The workers, the thousands of men who physically moved the stones, who suffered and died to make the pyramid real, won't be mentioned except possibly as abstract numbers, labor statistics in administrative records. This is the pattern of ancient monumental construction everywhere, not unique to Egypt. The monuments survive, impressive and celebrated. The workers are forgotten, reduced to evidence in cemeteries and questions about construction methods. We look at ancient architecture and wonder how they built it, and the answer is always the same, with tremendous human effort, with workers who were forced or coerced or compelled by circumstance, with bodies that were damaged and lives that were shortened, with suffering that was considered acceptable cost for architectural achievement. Modern construction of comparable structures would require machinery, cranes and trucks and power tools, safety regulations and worker protections, engineering that minimizes human risk. The Great Pyramid could be built today with a fraction of the human cost, the dangerous work done by machines instead of muscles, the precision achieved through technology rather than through rejecting imperfect blocks that required additional hauling. But ancient Egypt didn't have those technologies, so they used what they had, which was human labor, abundant and cheap and replaceable. From Pharaoh's perspective, the human cost was justified by the importance of the project. From the architect's perspective, the cost was acceptable because the pyramid was completed successfully. From the priest's perspective, the cost was sacred, sacrifice, enabling divine purpose. From the worker's perspective, the perspective you have lying in your barracks with your body aching from today's hauling and dreading tomorrow's repetition, the cost was your life, your health, your years, your suffering, and the compensation was bread and onions and beer and the promise that you could eventually stop. The pyramid will stand for thousands of years. Your back will never fully heal. Both these facts are results of the same construction project, different outcomes for different participants. And which fact is more significant depends entirely on whose perspective you adopt. 20 years after construction begins, the Great Pyramid is completed. The final block is placed, the capstone installed. The outer casing of fine limestone makes the surface smooth and white, reflecting sunlight brilliantly enough to be visible for miles. Pharaoh Khufu inspects his completed monument, satisfied that his pathway to eternal life is secured. The priests conduct ceremonies blessing the pyramid and the pharaoh. The architects are rewarded with honors and gifts for their successful management of the project. The overseers receive recognition for maintaining construction pace. The workers are dismissed. After 20 years of conscription, hauling, suffering, you are told the work is done. You are released from service, free to return to your village. No ceremony for the workers, no recognition, no compensation beyond the years of food and shelter already provided. Just dismissal, the administrative equivalent of discarding a worn-out tool. You are 32 years old, chronologically, 50 physically. Your body aged beyond your years by the hauling work. Your back is permanently damaged, curved forward, unable to fully straighten, pain constant and significant. Your knees are ruined, cartilage gone, bone grinding on bone with every step. Your hands are scarred and deformed, the fingers not quite straight anymore, grip strength reduced, fine motor control impaired. Your lungs are compromised by years of breathing stone, dust. Your breathing labored even at rest, any physical exertion leaving you gasping. Your teeth are worn down by gritty bread, several missing, others cracked or obsessed. Your vision is deteriorating, your hearing damaged by constant noise. Your body a catalogue of damage accumulated over 20 years. But you are alive, you survived. Many didn't. The workers' cemetery contains thousands of your former co-workers. Men who weren't as fortunate or resilient or lucky, who died from accidents or disease or exhaustion or simple physical collapse. You outlasted them, and now you get to leave, return to whatever life exists for you outside the pyramid. The journey home takes weeks, walking because you can't afford transport, moving slowly because your damaged body can't sustain normal walking pace. You travel with other dismissed workers, a group of damaged men shuffling across Egypt, heading to various villages, sharing the bond of survival, but too exhausted for much conversation. The group gets smaller as men split off toward their home villages, until eventually you are alone. The last stretch to your village, walked solo. Your village looks smaller than you remember, or maybe you are just different, changed by pyramid work into someone who sees things differently. The village is the same. It's mud brick houses and farming plots, and familiar faces. But you are not the same person who left 20 years ago. You are older, damaged, carrying experiences that no one here can understand, because they weren't there. Didn't haul stones, didn't watch men die, didn't spend 2 decades being slowly destroyed. Your wife, if she is still alive, doesn't recognize you at first. 20 years has aged her too, but naturally not through forced labor. She is heavier, her face lined, her hair graying, but she is recognizable as the person you left. You are not. You are bent and scarred, and moving like an old man despite being only 32. When she realizes who you are, the recognition is complicated, relief and grief mixing. Glad you survived, but horrified by what survival cost. Your children, who were toddlers when you left, are adults now, strangers who barely remember you, whose lives proceeded without your presence, who see you as an obligation rather than a father. They are polite, respectful in the way Egyptians treat elders, but there is no affection, no bond, no relationship beyond legal and social obligation. You are a stranger to them, and they're strangers to you, and 20 years can't be recovered or replaced. The farm is still there, maintained by your wife and relatives and your children as they grew old enough to help. The work continues, the cycles of flooding and planting and harvest that defined your life before conscription. But you can't do the work anymore. Your body is too damaged for the sustained labor that farming requires. You can manage light tasks, supervision, but the actual physical work is beyond you. You've become dependent on your family's support, no longer the provider, but the provided for, your role reversed by pyramid damage. The villagers treat you with respect that feels like pity. They see what the pyramid did to you, see the physical damage, and they're respectful because pyramid work was service to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh is divine. But the respect is mixed with pity because you are clearly broken, clearly unable to function, normally paying permanent price for temporary service. They don't ask many questions about pyramid work because they don't want to hear the answers, don't want to know what conscription might mean for their own sons when the next great project begins. You live the rest of your life, however many years remain, in your village. The physical damage doesn't heal. Just gets worse as you age, the accumulated injuries progressing, arthritis advancing, respiratory problems worsening. You die younger than you would have without pyramid service. Maybe at 45 or 50 instead of 60 or 65. The decades of potential life sacrificed to Pharaoh's monument. Your death is unremarkable. A former pyramid worker, dying from complications of old damage, buried in the village cemetery with simple ceremony. No connection is made between your death and the pyramid. No record suggests that your premature death was caused by construction work. You are just another peasant who died, and the pyramid still stands, and the connection between your death and that standing monument is invisible to everyone, except possibly your family, who know what the pyramid cost but have no power to demand different treatment or compensation. This was your life. This was the life of thousands of pyramid workers, variations on the same theme of conscription, suffering, survival, or death, and permanent damage for those who survived. The individual experiences varied. Some workers had it slightly better or worse, but the pattern was consistent. Ordinary people forced into extraordinary labor, their bodies used as tools, their health sacrificed, their lives shortened or ended, all to build monuments that would outlast them by millennia. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands today, 4,500 years after completion, still the tallest human-made structure on Earth for thousands of years, still impressive, still studied, still celebrated as an achievement of ancient engineering. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the only wonder still largely intact. Millions of tourists visit annually, taking photographs, marveling at the scale and precision, asking guides how it was built. The guides explain the engineering, describe the ramp theories, discuss the organizational achievement, mention that the workforce was probably conscripted rather than enslaved. Note that workers were provided food and shelter. The explanations are factually accurate and emotionally sanitized, focusing on the impressive aspects while minimizing the human cost. The tourists don't want to hear about suffering. They want to appreciate ancient achievement, take their photos, buy souvenirs, move on to the next site. The workers' cemetery is sometimes mentioned, sometimes visited by more thorough tourists. The excavated skeletons displayed in museums. The evidence of physical trauma and shortened lives documented in academic papers. The evidence is there for anyone who wants to see it, proof of what pyramid construction cost the workers who did the actual building. But the evidence doesn't change the dominant narrative, doesn't make people see the pyramid primarily as a monument to human suffering rather than human achievement. Both narratives are true, but only one is commonly told. And you were there, you specifically, the hypothetical worker I've been describing as you throughout this script, the composite figure representing thousands of actual individuals who hauled stones and suffered and survived. Or didn't. You weren't hypothetical. You were real people, each with a name and a life and a family, and a body that was damaged by pyramid work. The fact that your individual names are lost doesn't make you less real. The fact that your suffering is forgotten doesn't mean it didn't happen. The fact that the pyramid overshadows your story doesn't erase your existence. The Great Pyramid required 2.3 million stone blocks, 20 years of construction, approximately 100,000 workers rotating through conscription, several thousand deaths from accidents and disease and exhaustion, and the permanent physical damage of every worker who survived. These are the costs that the pyramid carries, the human foundation on which architectural achievement stands, the suffering built into every stone block that tourists photograph without seeing. So yes, the pyramid is impressive, the engineering is remarkable, the organizational achievement is extraordinary, the precision is astonishing. All of this is true, and it was built by people like you, conscripted from villages, forced into labor they didn't choose, worked until their bodies broke, given minimal compensation, and forgotten as soon as they stopped being useful. Also true. Both truths exist simultaneously, and understanding the pyramid requires acknowledging both, holding the achievement and the cost in mind together, recognizing that human accomplishment often comes with human price, and that the price deserves recognition even when it is uncomfortable to acknowledge. Welcome to ancient Egypt, where the monuments are eternal, the pharaohs are gods, and the workers who built everything are dust, and unmarked graves and a footnote in history books about construction methods. You hauled the stones. Now you are part of the foundation. That is pyramid building. That is what it cost. That is the truth behind the postcards. But there is one more thing we need to talk about. One final aspect of pyramid construction that completes the picture of what you endured. The moments when you almost broke, when continuation seemed impossible, when your mind approached collapse, even though your body kept moving. These moments came unexpectedly, triggered by accumulation, rather than single events. You'd been hauling for hours, the same repetitive motion, pull step, and suddenly the meaninglessness of it would hit you like physical impact. You are destroying your body to move a rock from one place to another. The religious significance, the pharaoh's eternal life, the glory of Egypt, all the justifications and narratives collapse, and you are left with the raw truth. You are an animal being worked to death by other animals who have the power to compel you. The overseer's whip cracks, pulling you back to the work, and you continue hauling because stopping means punishment. and punishment means more pain on top of existing pain. But the moment of clarity doesn't fully fade. It stays in the back of your mind, a splinter of awareness that makes the work harder because you can't fully believe the justifications anymore. You are not serving the gods. You are serving people who have power and use it to extract labor from people who don't. Or the moment comes during a rest period, sitting in shade that isn't really cool enough to provide relief, eating bread that tastes like sand and onions, that make you want to vomit from repetition, watching other workers who look as destroyed as you feel. And you realize this is your life now. Not temporarily, not for a short period, you can endure, but for years more. Years, multiple years of this exact experience, day after day, the monotony broken, only by variations in how much you suffer. The despair that follows this realization is chemical, biological. Your brain's response to impossible situation creating genuine depression that no amount of willpower can overcome. You stop caring about anything. Food loses what little appeal it had. Sleep becomes just a break from consciousness, rather than genuine rest. The work continues, but you are not present for it. Your body moving mechanically, while your mind retreats to somewhere distant where the pain can't reach. Some workers never come back from these moments. They become the hollow men, the ones whose eyes are empty, who respond to commands but show no initiative, no personality, no presence. They're alive in the technical sense, breathing and moving and consuming food, but they're not really there anymore. The person they were has retreated so far inward that they might never return, and even if they physically survive pyramid construction, they'll never fully recover their humanity. You came close to becoming one of them, multiple times. The moment on the ramp at 80 feet elevation, when you looked at the edge and realized falling would solve all your problems, would end the pain and exhaustion and hopelessness. In one quick moment. The moment in the barracks, when you couldn't remember why you were trying to survive, couldn't remember what waited for you back in your village, couldn't generate a single reason to get up tomorrow and start hauling again. What kept you going wasn't strength or courage or determination. It was smaller things, almost trivial. The man next to you in the hauling line making a joke about the overseer. A moment of humor that reminded you that humans can still find absurdity, funny even in hell. A meal where the bread was slightly less terrible than usual, where the onions were almost fresh, where the beer had a little more flavor, and for 5 minutes the sensory experience wasn't entirely negative. A night where you slept for 3 uninterrupted hours and woke feeling marginally less exhausted than usual. These tiny positive experiences, scattered among the overwhelming negative, created just enough reason to continue. Not because you believed things would improve, not because you had hope for the future, but because the immediate present moment was fractionally better than death. And humans are wired to choose life even when life is barely worth living. That is what kept most workers going. Not strength but biology, not courage, but the simple fact that suicide requires active choice, and continuing requires only passive acceptance of default state. The psychological damage from pyramid construction, the depression and trauma and damaged sense of self, is less visible than the physical damage, but equally permanent. You'll carry the psychological impact for whatever remains of your life, the experiences of prolonged suffering creating changes in how your brain functions that can't be fully reversed. Modern psychology would recognize your symptoms: PTSD from the accidents and deaths you witnessed, depression from the prolonged stress and hopelessness, possible dissociative symptoms from the moments when you mentally retreated from unbearable reality. But Bronze Age Egypt doesn't have psychology or treatment for mental illness. If you show symptoms, if you are not functioning normally after returning home, your community will see you as damaged by the pyramid, but won't have framework for understanding or treating the damage. You'll be the strange former pyramid worker who doesn't talk much, who flinches at loud noises, who sometimes stares into distance like he is seeing something no one else can see. People will avoid you, not from cruelty, but from discomfort, not knowing how to interact with someone who has been broken in ways they don't understand. The children who grow up hearing stories about the pyramid's construction will hear heroic narratives. Their grandparents, the generation removed from the actual workers, will tell stories about how their father or grandfather helped build the Great Pyramid, participating in Pharaoh's grand project, contributing to Egypt's glory. The stories will be proud, stripped of the suffering, focusing on the achievement and the scale and the impressiveness. The children won't hear about the whips or the heat or the crushed limbs or the slow starvation or the permanent physical damage. They'll hear about participation in something greater than individual lives, about service to Pharaoh and the gods, about being part of history. And maybe that rewriting of memory is necessary for the survivors and their families, Maybe carrying the full truth of what pyramid construction cost is too heavy, and the only way to live with the experience is to reshape it into something bearable, something that has meaning beyond raw suffering. Maybe the heroic narrative is the price of psychological survival. The story that lets damaged workers sleep at night without screaming, the framework that gives meaning to years of pain. But maybe it is also another cruelty, erasing the workers' actual experience, replacing their truth with a comfortable narrative that serves everyone except the workers themselves. The truth of what you endured, the reality of pyramid construction, deserves to be remembered accurately, not buried under stories about pride and service and glory. You suffered. That suffering had no glory in it, no pride, nothing noble or heroic, just pain and exhaustion and slow destruction. That is the truth, and forgetting it or reshaping it into something more comfortable dishonors your actual experience. The pyramid exists because you and thousands like you hauled stones until your bodies broke. Not because of divine intervention, not because of advanced lost technology, not because of aliens or any of the other theories that people propose when they can't believe humans built it. You built it. Humans built it. With muscle and rope and inclined planes and levers and sustained effort that destroyed the people performing it. The method isn't mysterious. It is just brutally simple. Move heavy things using human power. Repeat millions of times. Accept the human cost as necessary price. And the cost was staggering. Several thousand deaths during construction, documented in the workers' cemetery. Permanent physical damage for every surviving worker, documented in the skeletal evidence. Psychological trauma for everyone involved, not documented but logically certain, given the condition. Family disruption for thousands of households, men absent for years or returning damaged or not returning at all. Economic impact on villages losing their working age men to conscription. Generational trauma as children grew up without fathers and communities, adapted to having their labor force periodically extracted for pyramid work. Modern Egypt treats the pyramids as national treasures, symbols of ancient achievement, sources of tourist income. The ancient pharaohs treated them as religious necessities, pathways to eternal life, justified by cosmic importance. The workers treated them as prisons, places where they were forced to labor, where they suffered and sometimes died, where years of their lives were consumed for purposes they might not have believed in. All three perspectives are real. The pyramids are impressive achievements, and religious monuments and prisons for forced laborers simultaneously. The same structure carries all these meanings, and ignoring any of them is incomplete understanding. Yes, be impressed by the engineering, also acknowledge what the engineering cost. Yes, understand the religious beliefs. Also acknowledge that religious justification for suffering doesn't make the suffering less real. Yes, admire the ancient achievement. Also remember the ancient workers who achieved it through their own destruction. The guidebooks don't usually include this information. Tourists don't want their vacation experiences complicated by contemplation of ancient suffering. The photos they take show the impressive structures, not the workers' cemetery nearby. The stories they hear emphasize the positive, the achievement, and the ambition, and the success, skipping over the human price or mentioning it briefly as unfortunate, but necessary cost. But you paid that cost. Your specific body, your specific life, your specific years were consumed by pyramid construction. You are not an abstract statistic. You are a real person who experienced real suffering for real years, and your experience deserves recognition, even though your name is lost and your individual story is irrecoverable. You were there. You hauled the stones. You paid the price, and the pyramid stands partly because of your suffering, built on a foundation that includes your destroyed body and your damaged mind and your lost years. So when tourists visit the Great Pyramid, when they marvel at the scale and precision and ancient achievement, they're seeing your work. Every stone block was moved by someone like you, hauled by workers whose experience resembled yours, placed by labor gangs that suffered the same conditions you suffered. The structure they admire is simultaneously impressive and terrible, a monument to human capability and human cruelty, achievement and atrocity combined into geometric perfection that has lasted 4,500 years. You would have preferred not to be impressive. You would have preferred to spend those 20 years farming, raising your family, living a normal life in your village, aging naturally rather than prematurely, dying of old age rather than from accumulated pyramid damage. But you weren't given that choice. You were conscripted, compelled, used, destroyed, and then forgotten, except as archaeological evidence, and as part of the abstract workforce that built the pyramid. That is the truth. That is what pyramid building was. Not the sanitized version in guidebooks or the heroic version in family stories. but the actual lived experience of actual workers who had no choice, and paid terrible price, and received minimal compensation, and were forgotten as soon as they stopped being useful. The Great Pyramid stands. That is worth remembering. The workers who built it suffered. That is also worth remembering. Both facts together, held in mind simultaneously, create complete understanding. The pyramid is simultaneously wonderful and terrible, impressive and horrifying, an achievement of human ambition and a monument to human suffering. Both are true. Both deserve acknowledgement. And the workers, whose names are lost but whose suffering was real, deserve to be remembered, not as abstract labor statistics, but as actual people who paid actual price for monumental architecture that outlived them by millennia. Welcome to ancient Egypt. The monuments are eternal. The workers are dust. Both facts matter. And one more truth to leave you with, because this completes the circle of pyramid construction and brings us back to where we started, understanding that what looks impressive from outside was hell to experience from inside. The tourists standing at the pyramid's base, looking up at the structure that rises 481 feet into the Egyptian sky, see the achievement. They see precision, they see scale, they see ancient ambition made real in stone. They take photos, they marvel, they wonder at the engineering. And they're right to marvel, because the achievement is real, the engineering is remarkable, the scale is impressive. But they're standing on ground that was soaked with workers' sweat, spotted with workers' blood, where workers died from heat and exhaustion and accidents. The ground they walk on casually, the base they photograph, the structure they admire, it is all built on human cost that they don't see and usually don't think about. Not because they're callous, but because the cost is invisible now, buried under 4,500 years of sand and time, and stories that emphasize achievement over suffering. You knew both sides. You experienced the inside view, the daily reality of hauling stones, feeling your body break down, watching men die, surviving through biological imperative more than conscious choice. You experienced what the tourist will never know, that building the pyramid wasn't an adventure or a glory or a triumph. It was just work, brutal work, sustained for years, destroying everyone who did it to varying degrees. The pyramid stands as testament to what humans can achieve when they organize massive labor and accept massive cost. It stands as proof that humans can build impressive things, even with primitive technology, given enough bodies and enough time and enough willingness to sacrifice those bodies for the goal. It stands as a monument to Pharaoh's ambition, to Egyptian engineering, to Bronze Age organizational capability, to religious conviction strong enough to motivate 20 years of construction. And it stands as a monument to the thousands of workers whose names are lost, whose bodies are dust, whose suffering is forgotten except in archaeological evidence that most people never see and fewer people truly absorb. The pyramid is all of these things simultaneously. Impressive achievement, engineering marvel, religious monument, and mass grave, in the metaphorical sense that every stone block represents human suffering, that the structure couldn't exist without the workers who were destroyed creating it. Your contribution to this monument was 20 years of your life. The permanent destruction of your body, the psychological damage that never fully healed, the years stolen from your family, the normal life you never got to live because conscription took you and used you and broke you for purposes you didn't choose and might not have believed in. That was your price. That was the pyramid's cost, multiplied by thousands of workers who paid similar prices. Was it worth it? That is a question that can't be answered objectively, because it depends entirely on whose perspective you adopt. From Pharaoh's perspective, yes, absolutely worth it. His eternal life secured through architecture that has lasted millennia. From the tourist's perspective, yes, absolutely worth it. One of humanity's greatest achievements preserved for them to admire. From your perspective, as a worker whose body was destroyed by the construction, probably not worth it, your suffering vastly outweighing whatever meaning the pyramid might have. All these perspectives are valid. All these answers are true. The pyramid's worth depends on who is evaluating it and what metrics they're using. If the metric is architectural achievement, the pyramid is priceless. If the metric is human cost per achievement, the pyramid is unconscionably expensive. If the metric is religious significance, the pyramid is invaluable. If the metric is worker welfare, the pyramid is an atrocity. The same structure, different evaluations, all correct from their respective perspectives. But here is what is certain. The pyramid wouldn't exist without you, without the workers who hauled the stones, who suffered the heat, who breathed the dust, who damaged their bodies, who died or were permanently broken by the construction. The achievement required the sacrifice. The monument is built on suffering. The impressive result came at human cost that was known, accepted, and considered worthwhile by everyone except the people who paid it. That is the final truth of pyramid construction. Not a mystery, not a marvel requiring exotic explanations. Just human labor, massive scale, sustained effort, and accepted human cost. You move millions of stones by having thousands of workers move them individually, one stone at a time, day after day, year after year, until the structure is complete and the workers are broken. That is how pyramids are built. That is how the Great Pyramid was built. With you, with your labor, with your suffering, with your body that is now dust, and your name that is now lost, and your experience that is now reduced to archaeological evidence in academic papers that almost no one reads. The Great Pyramid of Giza, one of humanity's greatest achievements, built on the broken backs of thousands of workers whose suffering was considered acceptable cost for architectural glory. Both facts are true. Both deserve acknowledgement. And forgetting the second fact in admiration of the first is a betrayal of everyone who paid the price for the monument we still admire today. You were there. You hauled the stones. You paid the price. The pyramid stands as your monument too, even though you are not acknowledged, even though you are not remembered, even though your suffering is invisible to the tourists who photograph what you built. You were there. That matters. Your experience was real. That deserves recognition. And the pyramid, impressive as it is, exists partly because of your destruction. That is the truth. That is what pyramid building cost. That is what you paid so that 4,500 years later, tourists can take photos and wonder how it was built. Never knowing the answer included you, suffering, dying or being permanently damaged. Also, a pharaoh could have an impressive tomb and humanity could have an impressive monument, and the cost could be forgotten in admiration of the result. Welcome to ancient Egypt. The monuments are eternal. The workers are forgotten. Both truths are equally real, and understanding the pyramids requires remembering both.